Hey, welcome to the Healthy Postnatal Body Podcast with your postnatal expert, Peter Lapp. That, my friends, as always, will be me. This is the podcast for the 24th of April, 2022. And, date before music and all that sort of whooply-doo means I have a guest on. And today I am talking to Dawn Barclay, who is an author of a soon-to-be published book. We're ahead of the curve here, called Traveling Different, Vacation Strategies for Parents of the Anxious, the Inflexible and the Neurodiverse. And this ties in very nicely with that interview that I did a while ago about neurodivergence and all that sort of stuff. So we're talking how to prepare your child mentally for the trip, what physical steps you can take, how to best prepare for it. We're basically taking you from the preparations of the trip through to the actual trip and the travel, and then on the way home and all that sort of stuff. We touch on that a little bit as well. Dawn has a tremendous amount of knowledge. The book is 344 pages long, so she's put a tremendous amount of work into this, and I think it's very useful. I certainly learned an awful lot, and I think you will as well. So without further ado, here we go. Cool. So we'll start with the first question. Traveling with children is almost always stressful. So what are some of the differences when it comes to traveling with kids who are neurodiverse or neurodivergent?
Peter, that's such a great question. Neurodivergent children are more sensitive to changes in their sensory environment, crowds, noise, even fluorescent lighting, new smells. It varies per child, and every child is different. And while no child loves transitions, neurodiverse children cling to the more predictable routine. So a change like sleeping in a new place can really throw them off.
Right. So because that makes traveling extremely tricky, right? Because I obviously non-neurodivergent kids, so to speak, their routine gets messed up regularly and they have trouble sleeping. But if you're really bound to a routine, so to speak, and then how do you deal with that as a parent?
Yeah, that's why I wrote a 344-page book, because it's amazing the amount of information I was able to get from the people I interviewed, and that included people who are certified in handling autism travel, certified autism travel professionals. There is a designation for them, and parents, and the mental health professionals that I spoke to and the different organizations I interviewed. There was just so many tips for each type of travel, whether it was getting started and starting small, or deciding where you were going to go, to airlines, cruises, buses, trains, camping, different sports activities, restaurants, you name it. I covered it in its own chapter. And there is a lot of preparation that's involved. Far more preparation is needed for a neurodivergent child than probably a neurotypical one, even though any child, when taken out of their comfort zone, is going to feel anxious and inflexible, which is why I wrote the title the way I did. And I will say that what was surprising is how many of these tips for special needs children will help any child, even if the child needs less of a degree of help. Every child can benefit from this book.
Because I mean, and this sounds obvious, I think, to some people, but maybe not so much to others. Preparation is everything when you travel at the best of times, right?
Yes.
Especially when you're traveling with kids. I know, life for me as someone with no kids, other than me grabbing my passport, my wallet, making sure my bank card is in my pocket somewhere, I'm pretty much good to go. It's the joys of not having, or the freedom of not having children, so to speak. But if you then add all of a sudden you have to prepare for stuff. So how do you, when you say start younger, how do you prepare kids for the journey. I suppose you tell them in advance, of course, what needs to happen.
There are so many different ways to do this. You start out with talking about it. And it isn't just about talking about it. With children on the spectrum, you show them social stories, and social stories are a specific way to write a story, and with a certain outcome that the child can learn from. It's a whole book. Carol Gray wrote a whole book about how to prepare a social story. And so that's really important to read up on too. And I do include her information in the book, but visual schedule. So instead of saying, oh, at 3:00 we'll do this and at 4:00 we'll do that, you might have it in picture form so the child can readily understand what's going to happen. So you're going to do that for every day of the trip and every activity. But you're going to start even before that. Videos are very helpful. There are videos out about the hotel you're going to go to, the attractions you're going to go to. You're going to do your advanced research to make sure of what hotels and attractions in the area you're going to perhaps are certified for autism or just autism friendly. And I create a designation or create a differentiation in the book and explain what that means. But just because a property, say, is autism friendly doesn't mean you should take that at face value. You should really call and find out what that means and how they earn that designation if they have one. Because it can mean so many different things, and it really depends on your child and what your child needs. So starting small can be something as easy as, say, you're going to go on a trip with a hotel. Maybe you go to a friend's house first or a family member's house first, so the child can try to sleep in a new environment that is not their home. And you can see right away where the problems are going to be. Some of the people I interviewed suggested bringing items from home, like a familiar lamp or the soaps they use at home and the toiletries they use at home, and set the room up as much as you can so it looks like home when they wake up in the middle of the night. For camping, you may camp in the backyard to start. Eating foreign foods, if you're going internationally, perhaps you go to an Italian or a German or a French restaurant in your neighborhood to try that food first. I had one parent I spoke to who they were going to go to Italy, so they had Italy month way in advance, where they would introduce some language, maybe a few words. They would watch videos about the country. They would make the food of the country. So the child has a frame of reference, and in that way, something is predictable. There are also books you can read about a child's favorite cartoon characters going on a trip, and I list those characters or those books. So there's something familiar, so the child feels comfortable and learns through reading or being read to what the trip may entail. So those are just a few ideas of how you can start small.
That sounds excellent, because you don't have to. I mean, this is so easy to forget when you're not neurodivergent yourself, when you're neurotypical yourself, that you don't have to change everything just because you're going on holiday. So instead of having a different kind of toothpaste, different kind of toothbrush, different like you said, different smelling blanket and all that sort of stuff. You can take a lot of the familiar stuff.
Yeah, many people actually do bring their own sheets and towels and blankets, because and again, that might be one of the reasons people take car or bus trips instead of airline flights, or they may fly and ship toys and blanket linens, that's the word I wanted, ahead of time. UPS can be your friend, but you want to really maintain some equilibrium for the child, and so it's familiar for them.
No, that sounds very sensible indeed. So what do parents tend to worry about? When I did an interview a while ago, like I mentioned before we started, about having the diagnosis that your child is neurodivergent, and that it's not that big a deal, that it's just information. as the lady was saying. So what do parents tend to worry about that they don't need to worry about so much? What is easier than quite often expected?
Some parents are surprised by how well their child does adapt to traveling, but it's still something they should prepare for in advance. And once your child has the frame of reference that I described, maybe by camping in the backyard or staying at a friend's house or a relative's house, future trips can become easier because, and that's why it's so important to start small, because then they have a frame of reference to say, oh, remember back when you went to Aunt Katie's house and what that was like? This is going to be like that time. So there's a little bit more predictability for the child. But it still can be jarring. I would say that the things that the parents do worry about, sort of everyone I spoke to had this concern, is what are people going to say or think about me or my child if there's a meltdown? And there's a whole section in the book about how people are dealing with that. And a lot of times they are just focusing in on their child, because if there's a meltdown, the only thing you should be concentrating on is how to get your child through it and not worrying about what anybody else thinks, because that's their problem, not yours. So that was one thing. And a lot of people have coped with that really well. And the whole idea of the book is so you never get to that point.
Sure.
But also, as long as you have the preparation done, everybody travels with a go-to bag. And I describe in each chapter practically, because I'm figuring people are going to jump around this book. If they're not going on a cruise, they're not going to read that section, but they may be going on a bus. So I include this go-to bag information in every chapter of what they should bring. And a lot of times it involves electronics. They're like an iPad or whatever's going to show the child their favorite television shows and movies that have been pre-recorded and loaded on, fidget toys, anything that helps with their sensory issues, just things that are comfortable, as well as always having their foods that they need so they don't get hungry. And of course, a lot of the special needs children have very particular diets. So you always want to make sure to have what they need. And that's described also how you get around. Like one parent said, not every restaurant we go to is going to have grilled cheese sandwiches, but they may have a buffet. And on that buffet, maybe bread on one section and cheese on another. And you can take them to the chef and say, can you make a grilled cheese sandwich? So little ideas like that help people prepare, but also that's not what to worry about. I think what they need to think everything through you have to be really organized about this, and you have to go, first, we're going to go to the airport. How are we going to handle that? How are we going to handle check-in? Who's going to check in while the other person waits with the child? Are we going to keep the stroller with us? Can we keep the stroller with us? When we get on the plane, we have to remember to talk to the flight attendant and explain the situation. Maybe we're going to explain it to the people sitting around us. And every single aspect of that trip has to be thought about in advance and come up with strategies, because by doing that advance work, you're going to have a lot less problems during the trip.
Yeah, no, that sounds excellent. And you mentioned, the maybe informing the people sitting directly next to you on the bus or the plane or wherever, or people just in your vicinity. I always think that's a good idea, no matter what. To be fair, if you have any sort of issues, just because I think deep down people are all reasonable. Other passengers are all completely reasonable. I know there's this trope about, oh my God, they always put me next to the screaming baby on the plane, that sort of thing. But I find most people are actually completely fine with that, as long as the parent of the screaming baby says, listen, I've got my baby here. She's probably going to be fine. However, do you mind? As soon as there's some sort of communication. So what can other travelers actually do? Because imagine I'm sitting on a plane and someone with a neurodivergent kid comes on a plane. What can I do to make their time a little bit easier, other than just saying, listen, it's no big deal, don't worry about it?
I heard of one parent, and I'm trying to decide who it was because it was in one of these interviews. It wasn't actually in the book, who would give little gift bags to the people sitting on the row.
Mhm.
That would be a little explanation of the child's issue, and maybe there would be gum or chocolates and just a gift to help them get through, because then people are going to be a little bit more understanding because, hey, they got a chocolate bar. So I thought that was a really good idea. But again, the purpose of the book is so the child never gets to that point.
Of course. So what can I do to help the parents who are on the flight with the neurodivergent kids? So someone sits next to me with a neurodivergent child, and we have a conversation. But is there anything specifically that I can do, or should I just stay quiet, shut up, and just look at my screen directly ahead of me?
Wait, are you speaking as the person who's sitting
As-
next to them, or the
yes.
parent?
No,
Oh,
yeah, sorry, as the person who's sitting
Yeah.
next to them.
that's someone else's book. That's not my problem. You deal with it.
Yeah.
I'm worrying about the parent and the child. I can't worry about the person sitting next to
Oh,
them.
no,
and how
don't,
to help them.
don't get. I'm not looking to help myself. I'm asking if there's anything I can do to help the parent with the child.
I think the whole point is to
Just,
help them not get to the point, and that
Yeah.
is to keep them busy,
Mhm.
to keep them occupied, whether it's a coloring book or it's sensory toy, or making sure you have food to give them throughout. One good tip that I heard was to make sure that the child has something to press, because that will stop them from pressing the flight attendant button during the flight. Some people suggest having little gifts to give them throughout the trip as like little surprise prizes for each amount of time that they are being occupied and being good. Or
Okay,
not
so-
bothering the people next to them.
Yeah, no, that makes complete sense. Okay, so now we've done that the traveling bit, so to speak. We've gone on the plane or on the train or wherever, and we've reached the other destination. We've reached wherever we're going. How can you best accommodate? Say you're going to New York for a day. There's a lot of sightseeing that has to be done, right? How do you prepare a neurodivergent child for an activity-filled day in a strange city when they're going back to a strange hotel at the end of it?
Okay, really good question. The first thing is, when you travel with that child, it has to be a child-centric trip. It can't be, I'm going on my trip and we're bringing the kid along and they're going to have to deal with it. So you know your child, and most children on the spectrum have prescribed interests that they might obsess about 16 hours a day. I mean, everybody knows that they might perseverate on a specific topic and they love it. So why not travel to where there's a museum or an activity that specializes in that interest? And I list in a very long chapter at the end all of the special interests I could come up with, and museums and activities around the country, and in some cases in other countries that are dedicated to that interest. So if you have a child who loves trolley cars, I've listed a bunch of museums around the country that deal with trolley cars. And I think that by spending that time with the child and indulging the child in what they enjoy, that's going to go a long way to making the rest of the trip work for you. In addition, I do list a number of venues around the country that have been trained in how to help this community, children in this community. So the people who work there have been specifically trained to be sensitive to what children on the spectrum need. And you may think to visit those attractions. And a lot of times there are theme parks, there are aquariums, there's zoos. Anything to do with nature seems to help, but you're going to know your child and you're going to have to build the trip around them. For hotels and vacation rentals, some people prefer to stay in a vacation rental instead of a hotel, since you're the only family there, and you have the room you need for the child to have like a special area to themselves to decompress. I list a number of properties that have also been named as either autism friendly or certified autism centers. So you might want to work with those places. But also, if you can't find one, you try to make the hotel work as well as you can, whether it's you ask for a kitchenette, because that will save you from going to a restaurant all the time. It just makes life easier. To making sure, well, there's a whole list of things you have to make sure of when you look at a hotel in terms of security, to make sure maybe there are cameras in case your child gets away from you.
Mhm.
You're going to, one mental health professional says, stay away from hotels with casinos, because you're going to have to walk around that casino to get to your room. And you want to make walking around the hotel as short as possible. You know, you don't want to make you drag it out. And you may want a hotel with a pool because of the sensory help that a pool can provide. So there's a lot of checklists in the book like that. There's even a checklist of how to evaluate not only a vacation rental, but a camping site.
Right. So, yeah, because I suppose when you're talking about, just because you mentioned casinos, I suppose the sensory overload of a casino would be a terrible, don't get me wrong, it's a terrible place for many people, but the sensory overload is quite intense in any sort of casino environment.
Yeah, and you would think that that would be true in a theme park too, but some of the kids adore theme parks.
Yeah.
Although one professional advised to bring sunglasses with you, even if you're
Right.
going at night, because
Mhm.
of the flashing lights, which I thought was a really great tip. But again, crowds in
Mhm.
restaurants, in any sort of gathering place, you're going to find crowds, and crowds can really set the child off. And what you find in a lot of these certified autism centers and other places that have been designated as autism friendly, they have quiet areas
Right.
where the child can decompress, and it's got lower lighting or it's less people. And there are maps that they hand you that will show you where those areas are. And so that's why it's so important to go to a place that caters to, you know, autism or any other sort of special needs, because the book is also set up for ADHD and bipolar and other issues.
Yeah, because that's a good point. It's something you mentioned earlier. There is a difference between autism friendly, as in genuinely autism friendly, and those who will, for want of a better word, tolerate people
Yeah.
with, and it's a horrible word, but you know what I mean. People say, "Yeah, we'll tolerate
Yeah.
different people." We're that doesn't necessarily mean they're equipped. They're genuinely equipped to deal with. They'll just ignore your kid when they're having a tantrum, so to speak.
It's very true. And that's why I urge people, and I write it a couple of times in the book, before you go, ask what they mean when they say
Mhm.
they're autism friendly. And even if they have special programs just for children on the spectrum, they may only be given one Saturday a month, and that might not be the Saturday you're in town.
Mm.
So that's why it's really important to double check all of the information, and also addresses change, phone numbers change, hours change. Take the information and double check it.
Yeah, no, that makes complete. It all just comes down to there's a whole heap of preparation that in an ideal world you want to be doing beforehand.
Yeah.
And I suppose that is one of the hurdles that a lot of parents with neurodivergent kids come across, is that the hurdle of a significant amount of preparation that you have to do the first time you travel and the second time, but I'm supposed it does get easier with time, right?
I think that once you've been through the drill and you've already got your checklist of what you have to do, then it's going to be a lot easier the second and third time, because you're going to be used to calling and checking. And there are some families that say, okay, this cruise line works for me. I go on it every year.
Mm.
This theme park works for me. This is where I go every year. And I hear a lot of that. I also think that one of the things you have to be careful of, and again, once you do it once, you'll know to do it in the future, is safety precautions, like whether you sew a GPS tracker into your children's clothing, or you put their name on a marker on their arm covered with liquid bandage so it doesn't wash off, or you know get taken away by sweat or whatever. Taking a picture of a child that morning, every morning you go out, so you have a fresh picture of them in their clothing of the day. It's very helpful if a child gets away. You have to prepare for things like that. Just like you're not going to go to a campground near water if your child can't swim.
Mm. Yeah,
So-
no, that is actually an excellent point. If you're talking about camping and all that sort of stuff, I suppose finding out what facilities are there around it, what the setting is, and all that sort of stuff is going to be
Yeah.
absolutely key. And that sounds sensible, it sounds sensible for every parent, right? If your kid can't swim, it doesn't matter whether they're neurotypical or neurodivergent,
Yeah.
you don't really want to be directly next to the river.
Of course. And also little things like you're going to the beach and your child's never been to the beach before. Maybe you go out to a craft store and buy some sand and lay it on the floor, or, with underneath some tarp underneath. I'm not telling you to throw sand all over your floor. But you get some tarp and then you put the sand on and you have the child walk on the sand so they get used to that feeling, because these are things you never think about with, normally. If you or I went to the beach for the first time, we're probably not thinking about that. If you live in Florida and you're going to Alaska where it's cold, assuming you're not going at the height of summer, maybe you want to practice wearing different layers of clothing at the same time, because that's not something you usually do at home. So these are the sort of things that are about thinking in advance, things that you might not normally think of.
Well, that's excellent, because I remember, because the sensation of sandness, of course, is a really weird one. And I remember I was trying the postnatal program that I run is the website and all that sort of stuff is set up to also be usable by people with hearing difficulties. So everything is captioned and everything is described and all that sort of stuff. And one of my members got in touch saying she has sight difficulties. So she can't watch the videos. And she asked me, listen, can you do anything with that? Because I asked for some feedback. She said, well, could you do something with that? And I tried. And as a seeing person, it is remarkably difficult to describe something very simple to someone who's never seen anything like that before, especially when it comes to exercise. When you're talking about things like a squat to you or I makes complete sense if I just show you the movement. And then there are one or two tips afterwards. And I found it almost impossible to describe things in a way that are meaningful to her without me actually physically moving limbs and all that sort of stuff, because I don't have the experience. And that's kind of like what you're saying, because it does tie in that if you've never experienced sound before and you are very driven by sensory triggers and all that sort of stuff, like what a lot of neurodivergent people are. I suppose it's something so easily missed by someone who is not neurodivergent. And when you're talking about cold, when you're talking about sound, when you're talking about grass, when you're talking about certain smells.
Yeah.
So
camping too.
Camping is a weird.
I have a whole paragraph that was written by this woman who describes camp. I think it was Angela Zizak, who describes camping. And it really is things you never even thought of, like, what is the smell of the campfire going to smell like to the child? How about the family that's like 10 feet away yelling and screaming, or people, partying, or the trucks passing by nearby if you're not way out, things that you wouldn't have thought of. I mean, you might think, oh, the child's going to need to be near a toilet, but even the smell of that,
the campsite toilet isn't the same.
So this is why it's probably something you want to test at home first. Or in a local campground for one night before you go on a long trip. And some people say, I'm skipping the tent, I'm getting an RV, I'm going to rent an RV, because then we've got a lot of the comforts of home. And if we're driving to our destination and it becomes a little much, we can stop at a hotel. And so we can break it up.
Yeah, no, see, that's again, there's so much there that I personally wouldn't even have thought of. And I'm thinking, and that is not because I'm not a parent, it's just because I don't have the lived experience of someone who's neurodivergent and have never gone through it. Yeah, there is of course only so much preparation you can do.
True.
Right.
Although my editors would disagree because every 2 seconds I'm like, let me add this, let me add this. And she's like, we really have to go into production, but no, we need to add this. So that's why I have a blog that's backing up the book, because things keep changing.
Things keep popping up. But yeah, because it's a completely different world out there year to year. Right. There are a lot of new experiences and things that were relevant 5 years ago so even there are a lot more tools, of course, available now to people as well.
And then what happened was with COVID, a lot of people who had invested a lot of time and energy in getting certified couldn't keep up their certification because they didn't have travelers the last couple of years. So I found that there were people who were certified in 2021, who had all that training, who then did not get recertified this year. And so I listed them as 2021 certified, as CAC, Certified Autism Center, because I felt they put in the time and they had the training, even if they haven't paid to keep up the certification. I think it's valuable to know. But yeah, there are different properties joining different, there are a number of certification companies right now. And things, they keep changing. I just wrote a story about an initiative called Azores All in Blue, about a big initiative the Azores are getting involved in to become autism friendly. So again, I'm trying to keep my blog up to date because that will update the book. It's the only way I could. I'm so obsessive. It's like the only way I can release this book is if there was a way to update it constantly.
Well, that makes sense, because otherwise, you can't keep bringing out new editions of the book every year, right? The publishers will lose their mind.
Yeah, they already have lost them.
So we're doing a lot of prep, and we're doing lots of prep. So would you say one of the first things you can do, of course, most parents with kids anyways, especially neurodivergent kids, they're all members of support forums and local support groups and all that sort of stuff. So would you say, prepare a checklist before you go? Practice as much as you can before you go?
Yeah, I'd say buy the book. And I'm not just saying that as a mercenary way, but I think there's so much information, and it depends on where you're going and how you're going to get there. And I do hope to speak at a lot of those support groups if I can. If they invite me to speak, that would be wonderful. But I think that there's so many people that can be helped by this book that I really look forward to seeing the response. But yeah, they have to, they should really go and think ahead, and also speak to friends who have also been through it. There are apps. I think there's an app called Autism Village. I think that's the name, where you can check on what other families are doing and their responses at different restaurants and hotels. I actually should check that, but I think it's Autism Village.
Right. Cool. Well, I'll have a look for that as well, and obviously I'll link to all that sort of stuff. Anyways, so we have our child-centered sort of thing. So this just popped into my head. On the way home, are you going to need an acclimatizing period again after the holiday? Most holidays are super exciting, right? You go to a theme park, like say you're going to Disney World for 2 days or something like that. I mean, that is spectacular. Do you then need to do anything at the back end when you're home? Or would you recommend doing something at the back end?
It's a really great question. I know that Tony Atwood, who's pretty well-known mental health professional dealing with Asperger's and autism, says be sure to congratulate the child when they get home on what a great job they did. One parent said, be sure to tell the child you're going home, because they may get there and not realize that this is what's going to happen. And then they have a complete meltdown because they're there. So you do have to set it up and prepare them that they are going home. I think there is a drop off. I know that I've seen that in my own situation, that after an exciting time, there is some downtime. So maybe, and this isn't in the book, but it would be a good adjunct, maybe prepare some special events when you get home, like maybe visit a local park or a local zoo or aquarium or museum, so that you can taper off rather than it just being really abrupt.
Yeah, because we all know that coming home after a holiday, okay, you sleep for one day, but after that, especially when you're younger, life sucks again for a little while, right? If you've just been surrounded by Disney and Mickey and Minnie and Pluto and all those sort of guys, and I'm told there's more to Disney World, but it's not for me. But it's then when you come home, it all slows down massively. So would you say, you don't want to go back to, you don't, in an ideal world, of course, most people already don't want to do this, but I know a lot of families do. You don't want to come home on a Sunday and then back to school on a Monday.
I think that's a really good point. I think you've given me an idea for my next article, which is going to be asking various people, how do you handle it when you get home? Because, and I'll put it in the blog, because I think it's a really good point. I do have a couple of pointers, but I don't have a whole article about it or a whole chapter about that.
Oh, awesome. Because now we've covered the whole trip, right? We've gone.
Yeah, I mean, there is, pretty much. I mean, I have information on sports. There are different sports trips that people don't think might be therapeutic, like skiing and golf and scuba. I talk about that. The adaptive skiing and adaptive scuba diving is getting very big, and I have a lot of different places you can go for that. Restaurant dining, how to handle it. Yeah, I guess then just you follow the blog after you
follow the
blog.
You go to the book, right?
Say.
No, you're quite right. I mean, that's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm thinking. Don't want to be giving all the secrets away here. I'd highly recommend. I mean, like I said, like you mentioned, 344 pages. That's a lot of information in the book.
Yeah.
I take it it's available on Amazon and all that sort of fun stuff.
Yeah, it's available on the publisher's website. It's available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Books A Million, the indie book areas, anywhere. I think Fodors, and I'm trying to remember, Waterstones. Is that still
Waterstones?
Open?
Yeah. I think they still exist. I hope so.
Yeah. Yeah, I think if you look online, it's all over the world on a number of websites, and it's available for pre-order now. At least the hardcover is, and the audio book will be. The digital book, the ebook, I don't think that will be available for pre-order. That'll be available on the 15th of August when the book comes out. But quite honestly, the ebook is not priced that much less than the hardcover, so you might as well get the hardcover.
Always get the hardcover. I always say, because let's be honest, we've all got a million ebooks on our Kindle that we're halfway through, and the hardcover is, of course, you can make notes in a hardcover.
Yeah.
And I know someone's going to email me saying you can actually make notes in an ebook as well. I know that's going to happen because I'm sure it's possible these days.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, you see, I've got a 3G Kindle. I know nothing. I have one of those that you have to buy a separate lamp for on the outside of the cover. So it's available everywhere. So that's good news, because it means we don't have to give Jeff Bezos our money. He's got enough, and we can go to proper bookshops.
And it's traveling. It's traveling different. Vacation strategies for parents of the anxious, the inflexible, and the neurodiverse. That's the name of the book. My name is Dawn Barclay, and the follow-up blog is travelingdifferent.com.
Right. And of course, I will link to absolutely everything in the podcast description anyways.
Sure.
So people will know where to, you can't miss finding it. I mean, I haven't screwed that up yet. Cool. So we've covered a lot. We've covered the start, and we've got the prep. We've covered the trip. Was there anything else you wanted to touch on? Anything else that you think, actually, Pete, you missed it?
Oh, I would just say that as long as you base the trip around the child, you'll probably be okay. Think about it in terms of what they're going through, and that will guide you. And also, if you find errors in the book, or you have had a different experience, or you found a location that I didn't cover in the book that you feel is noteworthy, or it's just the book has helped you in any way, I'd really appreciate a note. An email will make my day to know that I was able to help you in some way. It would be very special and meaningful for me.
Cool. Well, there you go, guys and girls. On that happy note, I will press stop record here, which, as always, is exactly what I did. Thanks very much to Dawn for coming on. You can find Dawn at dawnbarclayinc.com. The book is for pre-order just about everywhere, but that is a good hub to start at. Like she said, she has a blog as well, where there's a ton of information on there. You know, every now and again you get a guest on that is just remarkably well prepared and doesn't just blab their way through it in the way that I usually do podcast interviews. And Dawn is one of those wonderful guests. I really enjoyed our chat. I will link to absolutely everything, right? So her Facebook page, her personal webpage where you can find the book and all that sort of stuff. If you're the parent of a neurodivergent child, or you know someone who is, pre-order the book. At 344 pages, you know you're going to get a ton of information. And you could tell from Dawn's description of what's actually contained in the book and all that sort of stuff, especially if you're based in the States, that she's listing an awful lot of places you can go to and places that are set up to give you the best experience possible. So, like I said, Traveling Different is what the book is called. Vacation Strategies for Parents of the Anxious, the Inflexible, and the Neurodiverse. And I think, if this interview taught us anything, it's well worth a read. What do we have as in the news this week? Because, we're going to do an in the news this week because we're roughly at the 45-minute mark, and that means you're in luck. So, in the news this week, I found an interesting study that was published in the New England Journal of Medicine about time-restricted eating or intermittent fasting, whatever you want to call it, on whether it is better than normal calorie-restrictive diets. So, this is quite a good study. This is a study that looked into the long-term effects. So they followed people for a year, for 12 solid months. Now, most of the studies that you find with regards to intermittent fasting, that Dr. Mosley and all those other guys like to quote a lot about benefits of intermittent fasting. A lot of them have been just done on observational studies or animal studies or just short-lasting studies in people, like a couple of weeks and all that sort of stuff. Now, this study involved 139 volunteers with a BMI between 28 and 45. So anything overweight to morbidly obese. 45 is obviously a big, it's a very high number for BMI. Now, they were randomized into two groups, and each group was told to restrict their calories for a year. So they were both kind of on the same, calorie-wise, at least the same diet, anywhere between 15 to 1800 calories a day for men and 1200 to 1500 for women. And one group was then further instructed to only eat between 8 and 4. And that is, that's that classic 8-hour period, the 16-8 split that you find with a lot of intermittent fasting. Lean gains and all those sort of guys like the 16-8 split better than, say, the 5-2. Now, they both also received nutritional shakes for the first 6 months of the diet to make sure that they got all the nutrients in and all that sort of stuff. And they had counseling for the entire year to help them stick to the diet. And that's an important bit. So basically what happened of the 139 people that were in In the trial, 118 completed the 12-month follow-up visit, which is quite a high number, 95% confidence interval. So a lot of people stuck to the diet. And the mean weight loss from that baseline was about 8 kilos each. 8 kilos per person, anywhere between 9.6 and 6.4 in the time-restricted group and 6.3 in the daily calorie restriction group. Now, the interesting thing is that the changes in weight were not actually significantly different in the two groups at the 12-month assessment. The net difference for one was minus 1.8 kilos. So that's very minimal, right? The net difference, 1.8 kilos. So that's not the net weight they lost. That's the difference between the two groups. We're just saying that the 1.8 kilos difference in weight loss, as in the amount of weight lost, mean weight loss, that's like 100 grams a month. So that is 150 grams a month. So that's not that much at all. And this is the first of the studies that really followed people over the course of a year. It was done in China, and everybody here is remarkably well qualified. All MDs and PhDs and all that sort of stuff that carried it out. There's no reason to doubt the outcome of the study. And it's interesting because there are, of course, a lot of people that tout intermittent fasting, Michael Mosley being one of them, as a really big, significant breakthrough in dieting. As in, this is the way to do it because there are loads and loads of benefits to it. And that just turns out that is not necessarily correct. Now, maybe on a hormonal level, there might be one or two changes. But the glucose and lipids and all that sort of stuff that have been tested here, levels of body fat, blood pressure, waist circumference, and all that sort of stuff that have been measured, had all improved, but that went equally for both groups. So it seemed that the weight loss itself was beneficial for both groups, and that produced beneficial results. But there is no added benefit to going on a time-restricted sort of thing. Obviously, it's easy for people then to come out and say, we need larger trials. 139 participants is a significant number to do over the course of a year. That costs a lot of money to do. Now, but doing it for more people, doing it for longer periods of time is just that much more expensive that it's really unlikely to ever get done. Now, of course, there could be some benefits for people with certain conditions, diabetes and cardiovascular disease, to intermittent fasting, right? No one is saying that there aren't. Intermittent fasting definitely serves a purpose. However, for weight loss purposes, in the way that a lot of people are selling it, and again, Lean Gains, Michael Mosley, the Fast 800, and all those sort of guys, the intermittent fasting element, the time-restricted eating element, is just not a significant bonus on top of that. There is nothing to suggest that actually is the case. And that's an important one, because I get quite a lot of questions about this. So I just say, listen, time-restricted eating, intermittent fasting works if it works for you, right? This comes down to being diet agnostic. It doesn't matter what you do as long as you can stick to it. This interview with David Prologo, Dr. Prologo that I did, right? Adherence is key. That's the thing. You stick to something for 12 months, you will get the same results. So, it's an interesting one. It's definitely one that I think a lot of people need to know about. And it's something that I'll probably touch on a little bit over the next few weeks as well, when we look into one or two questions that I've had over the last few weeks. Anyways, that is all for this podcast. New bit of music coming up now. nice bit of groovy. A groovy bit of music. Peter@healthypostnatalbody.com. Right? If you have any questions, any comments, just get in touch. Right? You take care of yourself. Bye now.
Feeling good, looking good, ready for tonight. Know these ladies out here looking oh so right. Cause it's that kind of night. Yeah. No stress, have fun and free your mind. No drama tonight, time to unwind. Cause it's that kind of night. You ready? Yeah. Everybody's out living it up. It's all love in the room. Bartender, fill me up. I need a refill. I came to groove, make a move. Somebody's here in the same mood. Yeah. The atmosphere is right to find some company tonight. You coming with me, baby? It's that kind of night. It's that kind of night. It's that kind of night. Not gonna press my luck, but I'm feeling lucky tonight. Yeah. Don't care about your son, cause I like what's already inside. Cause it's that kind of night. Yeah. Now I'm trying to figure out the next line to the song. Yeah. Cause girl, you blow my mind. Yeah, you got it going on. Cause it's that kind of night. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Come on. Only good vibes here. Everybody's living it up. So we're feeling good tonight. Here in the same mood. Come on with me tonight, baby. It's right to find some company tonight. It's that kind of. It's that kind of. It's that kind of night. Hey. It's that kind of. It's that kind of night. It's that kind of night.
Panoramic view from the top floor. This is how I feel, how you live when you got dough. Resuscitate your hustle, dollars critical. Yeah. An emphasis on the dollar, homie, being broke pitiful. Only good vibes here, good look all year, so we good all year. Yeah, it's only good vibes here, good look all year,
so we're good all year.
Yeah.
Everybody's living it up. Yeah. It's all love in the room, bartender, fill
Come
me
on,
up.
yeah, so we good all year.
Came and groove, make a move, somebody's here in the same mood.
I know you feel me, yeah.
The atmosphere is right to find some company tonight.
Let's go.
Only good vibes here, everybody's living it up. We're having fun tonight, baby. Bartender, fill me up. Come on, come on, come on, come on. Make a move, somebody's here in the same mood.
I know y'all in the same mood.
The atmosphere is right to find some company tonight. I'm looking for you, baby. It's that kind of. Come on, it's that kind of. We're gonna have a good time. It's that kind of. Yeah. It's that kind of night.